My name is James Brown, Jr., born in 1939 in Harlem, New York City. When I was born to two parents from the South, which was Florida. They were grandchildren, especially my mother. My father's history, he didn't talk about the South at all. My mother, as soon as I was born, within 4 months of my birth, took me directly to her family, which were her ancestors and my ancestors. And in taking me there, he took me to the forest. And the forest, that's why we see so many trees, because I was taken to the forest. My mother's grandparents were escaped, enslaved Africans from South Carolina. So that makes me an African, born here in America. Both of my parents were extremely talented. They were artists and didn't know they were artists because the work that they did was their work, their jobs. My father was a tailor, carpenter, upholsterer. He was multi-talented. My mother, she made her own clothes and she worked in a factory in New York City. In the factory, she worked in the plastic factory, and that's when many people of that generation, and some people say they still have them, plastic covers on their furniture, and a lot of people can attest to these plastic covers. Well, my mother was one of the people, and she was an activist because she started a union. She fought for them to have a union, and that was during the time that people were fighting to have a union, and she was in the forefront of getting a union into the factory. My early education as far as an artist, I started painting and drawing at the age of 4. My first schooling was at the Art Students League in Manhattan, which I didn't feel there was enough discipline at the Art Students League. And it was part-time. So I moved on to the School of Visual Arts, part-time. And I say part-time because I couldn't afford to go full-time, and I didn't understand the educational system, but I was damned and determined to go to school and study art. So for the next 10 years, I was going to school part-time at the School of Visual Arts, which is where all my graphic work that's seen in all of my work was my early introduction to all the graphic lines that is seen in my work from the beginning of my earliest piece, 1968, to my latest pieces. The graphic line has been consistent throughout up until today. From art school by the late 60s, mid-60s, we got into the Civil Rights Bill being passed and the Black Arts Movement, the Black Power movement, and there were lots of changes in the black communities throughout these United States. And many of us, for the first time, were given a vehicle to create from, and that vehicle allowed us to create bodies of work which have been consistent for those that are still alive and those who are gone, created some tremendous bodies of works. It was an emotional time during the Black Power movement, the changes in the black community, and the assassinations, which was the most powerful time that 3 of the major leaders in the black community were assassinated: Medgar, Malcolm, and Martin. And at the same time, a group of young men and women who were protecting the community, who were known as the Black Panthers, were seen by another group of people, by society, as a menace to society, to them. But they were helping the community, the black community. At that point, we were no longer colored people. We were no longer Negro people. We began to use the word black is beautiful, and we began to call ourselves black people. Well, we know that there's no land called Blackata, but we begin to identify with Africa and its culture, multitudes of us. The Black Panthers were protecting the community and helping the community throughout the country as social workers would. Anything that was needed in the community, they got for the people, to help the people, as if they were social workers. And as a matter of fact, they did function as social workers. This whole period during that 60 period was a very emotional time with all of the killing and whatnot, and eventually the elimination and the assassination of the Black Panthers did occur, and all they were trying to do was help the community. So it left a lot of people in the community and very fearful, very depressed, very confused, to the point of not knowing what to do next, I would think. But many of us did survive that traumatic period and realized that we had to do something for the community. By this time I was turning 30. And at this point of turning 30, there are 3 stages in life that is life-changing, and those stages are Saturn returns. And that was my first Saturn return. And if you survive your first Saturn return and your second Saturn return and your third Saturn return, each 30 years, you have work to do. I found myself on a spiritual journey, and I found myself going into the healthcare business, helping people in the community, in Harlem Hospital. Harlem Hospital had a program, School of Nursing, and there I began to study for the next 2.5 to 3 years to become a registered nurse. There I met my wife, who was working on her first PhD, and she was one of the administrators. She was one of the administrators in the hospital. And that was a shock to the whole nursing facility. What? Anyway, I did become a registered nurse for the next 30 years. After I passed the state board, my wife was already down in Nashville, Tennessee, working on a program at Meharry Medical College. And there I found myself at Meharry Medical College studying a program in the mental health practitioner program. And this whole mental health thing has been following me ever since I was a child, being interested in what is this about all this behavior, unusual behavior at any rate. But I had gotten to a point that I never stopped doing my work. So by 1982 or 3, we had moved from Nashville, Tennessee to Florida, and there in Florida, I got my bachelor's in fine arts. All they had to do was give me my paper, and they would walk in the front door and walk out the back door, because I had all these credits. Anyway, I got my bachelor's from the University of Florida, South Florida, fine arts. Then from there, I was told by the chairman of the department, because then I was talking or thinking in terms of doing my master's, and the chairman said, "You're not going to be able to do your master's here," because they could see the quality of my work and see where it was going, because of the paper that I wrote for my final project, which dealt with African art history. And I already knew that I was focusing on Howard University. From that point, I found myself leaving Florida, and my wife had to stay there because she was working on a project. Meanwhile, we were doing a study of my family, researching my family, because my wife had never been to Florida, been south rather, and she was an anthropologist or pre-anthropology. We started researching our family, my family, and we documented a tremendous amount of the family history, of my family history. And a book was written also. And off to Washington, D.C. to get my master's degree at Howard. And that's how I got to Washington. Arriving in Washington, my master's thesis became, I designed a butterfly series, transformation through the art of hair adornment. I was also working studying, doing intern at the Smithsonian African Art Museum. Studying at that point, training to be a docent. At the same time, working on my master's, which that Smithsonian program was really a master's program, and they really should have been giving us a master's degree for the program also, but they didn't. But at any rate, the experience and all the knowledge that I absorbed and found out that there was stuff that I knew that I didn't know that I knew about our history, which, as I look back through the years, I see in my work that certain things have been revealed to me at an unconscious level in my work. Well, no justice, no peace. Apparently it did start in the 60s. And the most significant piece was the 1968 watercolor piece and the collage. I wound up with a series of collages. I was always moving, living on the Lower East Side. And I had a brick wall. And whatever events were happening in the community throughout the African American community, I placed on a brick wall. Now, this was an influence of a photographer named Roy Lewis, who was a freelance artist photographer for Johnson Publication, Ebony. And Roy had photographed the Wall of Respect in Chicago. And I was impressed with this wall of respect in Chicago, which inspired me to create my own wall of respect. So I have 4 more collages, but this one is the most powerful one that's hanging on the wall here. This one is the most powerful one because this one covers all of the assassinations that happen in the black community. That one talks about all of them. So it is the most powerful one. And it's 1968, 69, and at the same time, this watercolor, pen and ink, drawing began to occur. Now, I didn't have any money. I was a so-called struggling artist. And somebody had gave me a roll of paper, and the paper was not quality paper, because that piece there is very delicate to the point of it could be crumbling. So I'm very grateful that this show has come about to save its life and have it framed, because it had not been framed until recently. And it's very grateful for this show. Then in 2018, I started to reproduce it again at another level. And reproducing it at another level, more information was coming with the same thing, but at a higher level. And it too was still saying no justice, no peace. Because the Bill of Rights was just something written on a paper, and the black community was still being devastated, being killed, being shot up by the powers that be. And it's still happening every day on a bullshit tip. Your lights are out on your car and foolishness. It's still happening. So what was the point of the Bill of Rights? It lied. It didn't do nothing. So no justice, no peace. We have to continue to fight for change. And at 85 years old, in my 85th year, it's documented in my work. It's definitely documented in my work. My most recent pieces of 2020, which started during the pandemic, especially the Capricorn alignment, which when those planets aligned in Capricorn, the whole universe changed. It changed. Everybody was affected by this Capricorn alignment, affected so badly that people were living in fear that they were going to die from this virus, this bug, and to not become a part of the installation. On the corner, all 4 corners of the Capricorn alignment, I am a part of the installation, because globally, as those that watch television, as folks were watching on their television, their iPads and their phones, globally, they saw these little red dots. They saw these little red dots. And these little red dots were saying, these are the people that are dying. These are the people that are dying in these various countries throughout this globe. And it was frightening. It was fearful. People were really being fearful once they saw these little red dots, red dots, red dots. And people began to wear these masks. So all you saw was eyes and So I'm a part of the installation. That installation. that it still exists today because this virus has not gone anywhere and it has changed many lives, people not knowing what to do, being totally confused, people's lives being turned upside down, not having no job, not having, everything just changed. And people being in fear, people becoming violent, people becoming depressed. All the emotions across the board have happened to people. And that's where my whole thing of human behavior and being concerned about mental health and my studying and becoming a mental health practitioner, a psychiatric nurse, which is something that started when I was a child and didn't know it. Because the first movie that I saw on television in like 1945 or 1946, because my father was in the military, he bought a television when he came home. And the first movie that I saw was that dealt with mental health was this movie called Snake Pit. And I'll never forget it. Snake Pit, where the medicines they had, they didn't have no medicine. They just had all these people just there. And if I remember, they might have been doing shock therapy, but that's about it. At any rate, and since that time, many years later, I found myself with the keys to the kingdom in mental health. But at any rate, my process for felting, many folks don't understand what my process is with my work. That's, first of all, I call all of my work tapestries, and especially my silks, because folks want to tell me that I'm a quilter, and I'm telling them I am not a quilter. That's not what I do. These are tapestries. My wool tapestries, everything I do by hand. I'm a traditional artist. I do the old way. I don't use the machine. I have nothing against people who use machines, but I don't use the machine. I grew up around machines. Mother, father, garment district. I worked in the garment district for a long time, around textiles and whatnot, where I saw multitudes of textiles, more than what we had in our house, because between my mother and father, there was lots of textiles, at any rate. And once I started felting, the first thing that I did as a felter was to make hats. And this is one of my felted crowns, which just pieces that I throw on my head and keep on going. But I made a lot of hats, and I made a lot of scarves, and I made a lot of shawls. The process for felting, this is called roving, and this is wool. These are my colors that I use, or used to use, because I've basically retired from felting because it's hard work. And it was not, to me, it was not being appreciated for the hard work that I was doing. So it is, and I don't have all of the tools. The tools that I don't have are my needles. But it's just a matter of separating the fibers and creating on a background. This is my canvas, this background. And laying colors out. And in the process of laying colors out, see, that's what I mean. In the process of laying colors out, you start creating a background. What I don't have here is the needles to begin to stipple the colors in to the background. And in stippling them in, you can blend the colors together. That make it look like a painting. And that's from the needles that have little hooks on it that hook the wool together, because the wool is organic. It is organic. And once it's activated, it comes alive and it locks like our hair. Like the locks in our hair, it locks like our hair. And you can see the blending of the colors. And that's just a matter of mixing colors. It's just a matter of mixing colors with laying colors out. Did that make sense? And then once you get everything laid out, the composition laid out, and this is a foam rubber under here. You can pull this off the foam, you can pull this off the foam, and it is already a textile. You can pull it off, and it's already a textile. But in order for it to become a 100% textile, hot, soapy water. I don't have all my tools here because, as I said, I gave it up. All of these bamboo, okay, bamboo screens. I've had large bamboo screens that this whole piece would be laid on the bamboo screen. Hot soapy water poured on the bamboo screen. Roll the bamboo screen up and agitated. And as you're agitating it, the magic occurs. It's very magical. It's very magical. The magic occurs. And within a very short period of time, it's already a textile. But it's the more you do it, the tighter it gets, that it becomes a 100% textile, as you see here. As you see all of those. And those pieces that are in those two are scraps of pieces that were laying around, which they wound up being remnants because I was trying to downsize after my wife passed in 2016. By 2020, I was at a point trying to downsize, and all these scraps started popping up, and the word remnants came, and they said, "Oh, these things have had a life of their own." Each piece that's there in those two pieces and the third piece have had a life of their own. So that's how they became remnants. And the oldest piece, the embroidered pieces, go all the way back to my earliest work that I did when I did my butterfly series at Howard in watercolor. I translated my butterfly series into a whole 10 applique and embroidered series. Nobody ever taught me this. It came, my father died and that's the same year that I graduated. My father passed. And when he passed, I found myself with one of his needles. It was a hook needle. And with that needle, I started embroidering. And that series is an incredible body of work, if I say so myself. 10 pieces came out, and when people see that work, they ask me, well, that's such and such, and that's such and such, and that's such and such. And all I can say, oh, really? The people who know what each each embroidery stitch is, I know, and people are telling me that's that stitch, and that's that stitch, and that's that stitch. It came from the ancestors, through the hand, from the head, the heart to the hand, onto the work. And that's a serious body of work. Believe me. If I say so myself. Anyway, that's on that. Now, on this silk, the silk starts very early because all of these silks, I wear my work. All of these silks are my inventory. Eventually this will be cut up into strips. Eventually this will be cut up into strips because I have so much. And those strips became, and these strips and other strips become my silk tapestries that you see here hanging. I stopped painting on silk, literally painting on silk like this, and no longer marketing them. I started cutting them up into strips. And after cutting them up into strips of various sizes and doing large pieces too, and I wear my work too. I mean, why not? It's mine. This is just a work in progress. And it's a little in progress. It's a little beyond the original silk that was placed on it because I've already started working on it. But it's been waiting in the wings for me to get back to it. I have another one in the house that's waiting in the wings for me to get back to it. And as I said, that strips cut up. Now you would never find that image in there because once I cut it up and place it in here, or it's hidden away in there someplace else, you would never know that it was there. Because once I start my graffiti line, once I start adding my colors, it changes, because I can change it. But these are the background, the basis for all of my silk works. This is how it had begun. I'm very grateful at 85 to be at this point, like never before. To have 3 shows back to back, with 2 receptions in one day, and I could only do one, go to one, and I had to pick and choose which one is the most important. So I'm ever so grateful, and I thank you.